Hello, everyone. This is Linda Westfall from the Software Excellence Academy, powered by the Westfall team. And I'm extremely excited today because one of my gurus, I think I've read every one of his books. I quote him a lot in my training and presentations. One of my favorite quotes from Tom is that if you don't actively attack your risks, they will actively attack you. And I use that one regularly in not only my risk management course, but every time I talk about risks, I'm using that quote. So he's one of my mentors, one of the people I've learned a lot from. And he's going to talk today on success, super secrets, and strategies for efficient delivery in projects, programs, and plans. Whoops. And with that, let me shift over to Tom real quick.
Thank you, Linda. Welcome, everybody. I'm talking from Norway, and this is exactly where I am, my little apartment building outside of Oslo. This is the Oslo Fjord, where I spend half a year. Give you another, but this is where we go for walks even in the wintertime on the beautiful Oslo Fjord. There's my email if you want to argue with me. I love to have a good argument or good questions. And there is a link to the slides. Okay, two basic themes on how to succeed. One is I'm calling it leadership, in other words, management if you like. And the other is about engineering, a technical level of success. In the leadership slide, I took a little photograph today from my summer cabin this morning, and that's inside the summer cabin. Everybody in Norway has a cabin. And then that's the Oslo Fjord, where all the ships, if you ever came on a ship to Oslo, you went right past this. That's an island. That's the other side of the fjord. And we just love looking at that view and the ducks and the boats and everything like that. So, number one, the greatest leader in methods, including software methods, I wouldn't say IT, but at least embedded software in cars and rocket ships and things, I believe is arguably Elon Musk. And fairly recently, he started revealing his methods in videos. Here's one of them, where he's happily touring his SpaceX. And I started collecting his first 5 principles, which I'll show you in a moment. But then I discovered that about every week, something else emerges, some new ideas. So here is another free book for you, Musk's Methods. It's a folder, and maybe next month there will be several more of Musk's ideas put in there. But I think he is great on methods that work with a vengeance. It's hard work to do what he does, but at least he succeeds in qualities and economics and things like that. Here are the first 5 principles. He just said, these are my 5 principles. Now, it turns out he's got about 70 more principles hiding in the other pages, but I thought I'd bring you through these lightly. So he starts with the idea of requirements, and he says, no matter who gave you the requirements, like even if it's me, the boss, Elon Musk, a very intelligent person, you need to question them. Everyone's wrong, even me, he's saying indirectly, no matter who you are. He then goes on to note that all designs are wrong. It's just a matter of how wrong. That's pretty humble and pretty challenging. And I think a lot of us, maybe we get requirements from a client or a manager, and we don't dare touch them. But Musk is very serious about this. You know, the more we can improve the requirements, improve the design, the better. Now he's got some other stuff here, and I've got some more detail on it. The interesting thing here is the last idea is to automate, and he makes a point. These principles must be completed in order. In other words, automation is what you do last, and thinking about your requirements is what you do first. And he made a fool of himself in automating the Tesla 3 stuff too early and too much. And he's giving us that hard-earned lesson that we have to think a little bit more before we just think automation is the solution to everything. I like these ideas for a very simple reason. I believe they're all correct and good and true, and I've been writing about them. So here is a free PDF copy. You have to buy your own paper copy, but a free PDF copy of my book, Competitive Engineering, which is only about 500 pages, and there are only about 10 ideas per page. But I actually have one crazy genius I work with these days. He's doing next level artificial intelligence, and he claims to have read this book 10 times. I don't expect any of you will do that or even once, but I just thought I'd let you know. So here's my now Musk just spouted his methods orally off the cuff. And so I thought about what's he really trying to say and how would we formulate it so other people would sort of get it straight away without being Musk fans. And so I've reformulated them here, okay? State really critical requirements only, and be prepared to learn quickly about even smarter requirements. You get the idea. I think the picture on the right here is much more interesting. The two rockets landing, did you experience that? Go and see the video. This is like blow your mind. How can anybody do that? He must be an alien. I don't know. He jokes about that sometimes. Okay, so I've reformulated these. Now you have to go back and read it at your own leisure, but this is what keeps Tesla and SpaceX cooking. I even went as far as to take the requirements thing and go into much more detail, right? Here's an example of me doing a requirement for United Nations Sustainability Program for disaster protection of poverty-stricken people. And what I do is I start off with a thing called an ambition level, the bullshit level that's in the UN plans. And then I say serious requirements like saving the world from poverty. They require that I measure, so I'm specifying my measuring instruments, how well we're doing, and that I state a scale of measure, which is well structured and well thought out, so that I can put numbers on how bad we are today in the world, 50, here it is, and how good we want to be in the future. Like we want to jump forward to this goal, and maybe 5 years later, we want to at least get to this goal. And in our dreams, we want to get to 99.5. So this is in my planning language, and I think really good requirements for critical values like life and poverty and disaster, or building my Tesla car or the SpaceX ships. It needs to be quantified. Or let me put it another way. We need to move from thinking like programmers and coders, and we need to think like software engineers, or maybe systems engineers, because that's where Musk is. And under systems, half of everything is software. Okay, so I'm not going to detail all this stuff here. It's there for those who want to study it. Here's more detail about design, if you're interested in design thinking. And for me, I'll give you a bottom line here. These bar charts are showing a variety of designs. And that first bar is how good the design is for my requirements. And that second bar is how much it costs, okay? So we can see the cost effectiveness of each design numerically with a little tool called an impact estimation table, which I will be talking about later. So here's a real example of a real client of mine who did so well with the qualities they delivered to the world market that they wiped out all their competition and bought them up. And there's a whole case study about that there. You can pick up down there. But they decided that in the coming quarter of the year, they had to focus on usability. So they stated a number of usability goals numerically, different kinds. And then they had weekly increments. This is week 9 out of 12. They deliver to the world every quarter. And there's the estimate of how good or effective their recoding design or strategy is. And there's the measurement of how good it really was, actually as measured by Microsoft, who became an independent measurer. The design was actually twice as good as they thought it would be. And they used this to manage, this is a small team of 4 people. They used it to manage their decision making about what will we do next week. Okay, and this is called an impact estimation table for design optimization. Here's the accelerate principle, but this is kind of fun. Here's the chairman of Volkswagen jealously noting that Musk in Germany is going to produce his cars 3 times faster than Volkswagen even dreams about. That's pretty good. He really does accelerate, Musk. Okay, and really fun to look at the videos of automated processes at the factory. And he does things like he designs the cars so that it's easier to automate. So he took something like, I forget, but it's 217 different parts and made them one metal part. Actually done in Texas, as some of you may know, in the for the model, I'm thinking is the Model Y. I'm not sure, a Model 3 in Texas, he's done this. Here's another one of his principles. It sort of says at the bottom, it's not one of his numbered 5 principles. He said, everybody should think like a chief engineer. Now, what he really means is everybody should have the holistic overview of the whole system and the whole purpose. They should actually think like systems engineers, even though they're just coding one part of the embedded software personally. And so he practiced that himself because he does a lot of very detailed work, but he's got the whole picture, you can be sure of that. And he's encouraging everybody working for him to get the whole picture and not get blinders on and not see the multiple dimensions of cost and quality that have to be thought about. What's the safest car in the world? Well, the NHTSA has said that of the 50 safest cars in the world, the Model 3, the Model S, and the Model X of Tesla are the safest cars in the world. How does that happen? Musk is actually a fanatic on making things safe, and he's hired the best safety engineers he can get, and he said, make these the safest cars in the world by design. That this is, and so they set up targets for how safe it's going to be in terms of probability of injury in this case. And then he lets the architects or the safety architects loose, and they design and they incrementally and continually design cars. Every week you get a new release of software for the car you've already bought. And in that software are things that make the car safer and safer and safer. I don't think people know that so much about the Tesla cars. They know things like its acceleration and its costs and its how far it can drive on a charge. But I think the most important thing for me in buying my car was it keeps me safe and my family safe, and that's by design and by using the principles we're talking about here. End of section 1. Part 2, engineering. Okay, so now I'm going to get even more technical, but I showed you the leadership example of Musk. I think that's really interesting leadership. And we're into the success book. Now, first, everybody has their own opinion of what success is, but I've tried to make my own definitions, and I hope you will think that my definitions are interesting. Okay, so look at this sentence. Success is achieving what you ultimately wanted according to your consciously improved plan. In other words, success is not what you wrote down in your requirements would be successful at the beginning of the project. It's not even what you incrementally changed your requirements to be better and better. It's sort of at the end state, maybe 2 years after delivery of the car, Musk is constantly changing his requirements and his definition of success. And that's what he ultimately wanted, even though he didn't know it at the beginning of the car project or the model project. So this idea that success is a future state, and we can say in 5 years, in 10 years, at end of life of the system, we can put a time on it. But the idea that we cannot probably know what is a successful set of requirements for the long term, but we can learn, and we can try to learn hard, better and better and better requirements, and then charge our engineers or our systems architects with finding technical solutions for reaching greater and greater success levels. Anyway, that's my definition. And in a sense, you could say that means that success levels are probably unknown at the beginning, but it's a very agile kind of thing. We incrementally find out more and more about what the market really wants, what the stakeholders want, things like that. And so now we can define failure. It's any degree of negative deviation from that. I hope you find that interesting when you think about it. So here, similar to the one we just looked at, this is affordability of education in planning global health and education. But here then is the ambition level to do really good stuff. And then here we've defined a scale of measure. And then here we figured out where we are on that scale of measure. That's how bad we are. And we figured out in the short term, we want to get to 65. And in the longer term, we want to get to 70. So we've defined a short-term and long-term improvement for this with numbers and for a specific set of things like kids in Africa with 7 years of education by 2023 and the long term by 2027. And these are the stakeholders that we're interested in. Okay. So this is an example of using my planning language, which is in the competitive engineering book, and it's in the success book for defining success. So these two are successful levels, and this where we are now is, well, maybe it's success right now, but tomorrow maybe it's not good enough. So you might not know what real success is initially, but you can learn what it is incrementally with feedback. So feedback is a major agile idea, although I don't think most people with agile do feedback well enough. A subject I've written a lot about and probably won't go into great depth here. Okay. So again, here is a planning for British poisonous gases in the air, toxic inhalation, and the ambition level is to reduce the pollution for cyclists within the term of office of the mayor. And here's the scale of measure. And here's where we are. Here's where it's going to go, get really bad if we don't do anything. It's going to go backwards. Here's the best ever done in a city. So that could be, our ambition level should go in the direction of the record, the Guinness Book of Records. Here's the shorter term improvement, which is 10 times better than the status. And we have a longer term improvement to get somewhat better than that. And we can argue about these. So now here's the problem. We don't just have one thing which defines success. In any real system that you're ever dealing with, you'll find that there are many different things we have to achieve simultaneously. I call them the top 10 critical objectives or top 10 critical value requirements. It doesn't matter, but it's the top 10 things we've got to get right. What about number 11 to 20? And the answer is focus on your top 10. You'd be fantastic if you achieve them. Most people don't even achieve their top 1 because they don't even define it well and design it well and implement it well. When you've done your top 10 and you've reached your levels, you can go for number 11. That's a dynamic prioritization process. So success is reaching the top 10. And the top 10 updated and changed as you're learning and going through maybe 50 months of a 50-month delivery project for major release. And these are for the top 10 for the critical stakeholders in the future of your system. And some of those stakeholders, you might not even know who they are. You think you're building a system for Texas or the US, and somebody says, let's export this and get rich. And somebody says, but the European Union has some laws we've got to follow that we don't have to follow in Texas. And you have a new stakeholder and a new requirement right there, right in the middle of everything. Here's a method I use when specifying scales of measure, which allows me to model very complex systems. I use a very general idea. This is actually for the United Nations sustainability goals, where I put in the scale general ideas like we're building different things. We have resilience of different types. We have different types of people who are vulnerable in different types of situations because of different shocks. Flood in Pakistan, to take a little example. And so these are called scale parameters. This is very advanced agile thinking of how to chop things up into small bits and deliver them in agile steps. And then I can say, what's my highest priority building? Let's just say it's economic power. My highest priority resilience, let's just say it's recovering. Sorry. And my highest priority this and that and that. I can take the highest priority slice and I say, that's my highest priority. Let me do that first in the first week or month of my project. This is agile. Let me deliver some incremental success for these, and then I won't need much time because it's a smaller slice of the very larger complex system. And then I can learn, I can get feedback, and then I can say, okay, for sprint 2, I'll do health power and resisting and weak health and family poverty and floods. Okay. So, you can choose any combination of this. This is a way of modeling, one way of thinking about it. Choose any combination that is your highest priority for the moment. And this is a way of doing agile in a much more sophisticated way than, for example, letting user stories or epics determine your fate. What is the secret of being able to guarantee success? Remember the definition, reaching the top 10 on time. When so many good people, intelligent people like you actually fail. What does it mean fail? It doesn't mean totally fail, but maybe you used a few $1 million extra, a few months extra. Maybe the usability was a little bit less than, and people are complaining about it. Maybe security isn't quite there. Those are degrees of failure. Okay, and if you look at the like the Standish Group's statistics, love them or hate them, you find that our failure rates are still decade after decade horrendously bad and ridiculous. We should have failure rates like bridges, no more than 0.2%, and we've got like 30% total failure and another 40% partial failure for IT systems. That means we don't have good enough methods, and I'm suggesting these are the better methods that will get us out of the failure mode. Try them. Here's the thing we call the Gilb cycle, the evolutionary cycle. If you like, it's our agile cycle, but it's an engineering cycle. It says we don't start with users and customers. We start with stakeholders, all 50 of them. We start with values and quantify them, the top 10. We go into an engineering or architectural mode and we find solutions, and then we look at how cost effective we think they'll be. We decompose a large solution, which might take a year, into monthly increments, and we deliver the increment that gives the most value for money, or the most values, all three, for costs. Okay. Then we develop the solution, deliver it into maybe even our current system. This could be an eternal cycle, not necessarily a project with a start and the end, but an eternal cycle. Then we measure what really happened. Did we get what we expected? No, maybe we need redesign. Yes, good, do more. and on we go. Okay, so here is, I think people are starting to move away from projects towards eternal cycles of change to existing systems, which I think has always been a good idea. Building systems from scratch is a loser's idea and quite unnecessary. No matter how bad your current system is, you're probably better off delivering increments quickly to make it a better system than it is. So I believe that predictable success is the result of conservative engineering disciplines and persistence. And by engineering, I mean, quantifying all the values and costs and getting measurable feedback and working in multiple dimensions. I mean, the competitive engineering book is my recipe for what I mean by conservative engineering discipline. So there's nothing new there. That's the way I guess they built the pyramids, okay? And I don't think just giving a good stonemason the project of the pyramid would have done it. I think there were some very intelligent architects and engineers in Egypt doing that stuff. Here's that same cycle, but one of my friends, UC Makela, did a maturity level model of the same cycle. And I leave you with that thought. Here's a primitive here's where you probably are now. Here's a primitive version of using my methods. And as you get more and more sophisticated, you will be more and more successful and less failure prone. These ideas are no secret. In fact, long before I was born, my father was an engineer, okay, and has 100 inventions patented, by the way. So, and he built like airplanes during the Second World War at Boeing, for example, B-24s, I think they were. And the secret engineering is not a secret, and education engineering is not that difficult to get. But there's a lot of people in this business, the IT business, the programming business, who even have degrees where it says engineering. But I don't see them using the engineering paradigm to do their IT stuff. Their paradigm is actually programming, coding, and testing. And you know what? That's not engineering. I call it soft crafting. All respect for good programmers and good craftspeople, but craft is not engineering. And the projects we have are so large and complex that in order to succeed first time around, not 10 years later, we're going to need to go for engineering, software engineering and systems engineering. Now, Leonardo da Vinci was an interesting engineer, and I just love many of his statements, but this first one really knocks me over. Life is pretty simple. Hey, do you think your life is simple? Anyway, he goes on, you do some stuff. Most fails, some works. You do more of what works. If it works big, others quickly copy it. Then you do something else. The trick is doing something else. Little message to innovators and startups here. Anyway, Leonardo's pretty interesting character. The secret of avoiding failure is to do this selection of the most critical stuff to do at the lowest possible cost, early and continuously. And then even if you're a little bit disappointed about the values you expected, you'll still get pretty good value. Even if the costs are a little bit higher than you estimated, you'll still get pretty cheap, fast stuff. And you need to do that continuously and regularly, like, well, at least every week, maybe every month, and some people will do it every day. Depends on your cycle. Now, we need to compute the efficiency. In other words, the values over the cost, the values for costs. I hesitate to say just money. And when you've gotten the point where your values do not exceed the cost, in other words, where it doesn't pay off, stop your iteration, no matter what, until you figure out something that will allow you to be more efficient, more cost effective. That's the secret of avoiding failure. Stop before you fail. but succeed with the low-hanging fruit of high values and low costs. Here's a little symbolic thing where this is profitable stuff, and then we reach the balance point where the values and the costs are about the same. This is the point we need to start thinking about stopping. And I think one reason people go into failure mode is they persist, even in agile, fulfilling the plan and the user stories without looking at the efficiency and making decisions like time to stop. We're out of our depth. We don't know what we're doing, and which means we don't know how to create enough value for the costs we're putting in there. So again, a restatement, to never fail, you need a high efficiency value stream. I know a lot of you are interested in value streams. And you need to stop quickly when it does not pay off. Confucius say, when it's obvious that goals cannot be reached, do not adjust the goals, adjust the action steps. In other words, you don't have to change your requirements, just find smarter design. Ah, he's a design thinking guy. I didn't know that about Confucius. Here are my failure avoidance principles. You need to know what numeric levels of qualities and values and costs are failure. You need to consciously design, like Musk does with his safety, towards good enough to get approved and then better than the competition. You need to, like I was talking about earlier, find low risk partial strategy increments, in other words, really smart engineering agile, and put them in your value stream, and you're going to accumulate value accumulation and delivery efficiency, constantly high value, low costs. And you're going to learn at every sprint. If you don't measure the values you have delivered, the costs you have incurred, you can't learn. And delivering your user story and the code and saying it works is not my idea of how to get feedback about values, qualities, and costs. We have to go one level up and be like real engineers, and by the way, like real scientists. And we have to measure every increment, and we have to learn early, at early stages, whether we're screwing up or we know what we're doing. Accentuate the positive when feedback is going well, and de-accentuate the negative. And then, as I stated earlier, if you've got a budget and you've got a time to deadline, don't use it all up and reach the deadline and say, sorry, we need another year. Sorry, we need another $1 million, because it's so complex and all those unforeseen things. Nope, if you do that, you're a loser. You should not be employed by your employer. You need to regularly deliver the value expected on time and under budget, like IBM Federal Systems Division did year after year with the clean room method. Look it up. So, defining success up front. What is it that determines these success levels? And the answer is your stakeholders. And which success levels are more critical? It's the one that the stakeholders say are critical. You've got to attain this level of security, or I will not use your system. I will not buy your system. So here we have a little map of a number of stakeholders, and we got to get out of that childish user customer. That's just for small systems, for people for 4 weeks or something like that. If you're designing really big corporate or national systems, you have to do what all systems engineers do. You have to start thinking about stakeholders early. Here's the definition of a stakeholder object called the board using language. And then you have to say, what's their stake? I mean, what do they value? What do they want? What kind of resources will they give you of time, people, and money to help you get anything done? Okay. The stakeholders decide. And if you are only looking at users and customers, you're not looking at the law on safety for cars, who is not a user and not a customer, you're guaranteed to fail in your system. You've got to look at all those things that determine success and failure. And they start with a broad understanding of your stakeholders and then of your stakeholder needs, okay? So we need to quantify and clarify those needs. We can't use words of type, we need to have very high security or state-of-the-art usability. We need to put numbers on that stuff so that people think like engineers and think clearly and really do agree on what the agenda is for your project. The moment you got everybody agreeing to get very much higher security, all 10 people have a different level and type of security in their minds. Get them to write it down sometimes and prove that. If you want a real agreement, you have to have numeric agreement about variables. Nothing new there, but we're not very good at it, okay? So symbolically, here's a set of top 10 requirements. This is for planning for City of London, actually. And, you know, here's where we are, and on some scale of measure, which is not visible here. And then here's the number we want to get to. So that's the agenda in a nutshell. And that's a very clear idea compared to we need better housing types and we need to deal with the crime rate and you know, we need to help the renters. I'm sure the new prime minister in Britain is having fun with all this stuff right now. Okay, so stakeholder values are the success factors. Other requirements, and I won't get into that, but the competitive engineering book goes very deeply into the other requirements. They're just the necessary conditions for being a player. The functional requirements, for example, are this type. The success and failure are the values. In simple terms, we can think about the qualities of the system, how well the system performs critical things for the stakeholders. I like to call them values, but all qualities are values and some values are not qualities. The systems engineering people call this performance requirements. Here's another one. Here's air quality, and we're doing language. It's a value. Here's a picture of all the different levels we're interested in on our defined scale of measure here. And here's the plan for how we're going to measure it. And here's how bad we are. And here's the minimum we have to deliver at a certain point in time for certain groups. And the goals are, that's the success level. This is the not fail level, okay? Anything less than tolerable is failure. And goal is defined as this number or better, okay? So we can define success and failure in extremely clear engineering and even terms that can be used for sub-suppliers in a contract. So, and you should be contracting for no cure, no pay. In other words, full payment when they reach the goal level on time, okay? The worst acceptable case, I gave you a simple example of it a moment ago, but we have a level we call the tolerable level, and below that is intolerable, but it also is another word for failure. And we have the goal where we have success and more. That's this level here. We wish to reach the goal. And there's this gray area here, if I can call it that, which is tolerable. So it's also partial failure, partial not success. This intolerable means total failure. Bummer, you know, can't use it. Nobody wants it. Even if everything is fine, this one is completely unacceptable. It makes the whole system completely unacceptable. I think people are not good enough at looking at costs. Here is an impact estimation table with 3 different types of costs. A lot of people are very, very focused on things like the capital cost. What about the maintenance cost for the next 10 years? Okay. We're very bad at engineering the system to be cheap to maintain. We keep on talking about technical debt, something we'll deal with afterwards. Mature systems designers design low technical debt into the system to begin with. Then you're really mature, okay? And others don't even think about it until they discover they can't fix the bugs fast enough to keep the system operational. And then they say, we've got to do this and that to make the program. Now, you've got to design reduction in technical debt towards maintainability objectives, mean time to repair. Okay, good. That little alarm there says I got 5 more minutes, and with a bit of luck, I'm going to skip a little bit till I get towards the end, because in fact, I have talked about these things more or less. I'm just sort of trying to make the points as we go along. Here, by the way, are those technical debt ideas. You'll find this in chapter 5 of the competitive engineering book. Do you know how to measure tailorability or portability or installability? It's in chapter 5 of the book I just gave you a free copy of, okay? And once you can measure them, you can state levels you need to get to, you can design towards them, you can deliver them, so you don't have a bad technical debt problem at the beginning of the life of your system. That is immature, but that's what you're going to get by using most conventional methods like Scrum and SAFe, just to mention a couple at each extreme. They don't try to do this, okay? Here's from that chapter 5. There's a direct link to chapter 5. There is, for example, maintainability at a very mature level. I don't have time to go into detail about it, but if you think you know anything about maintainability or technical debt, read that and think about it. It applies to your system, and this is how you need to think about technical debt. Let's see. I want to move towards the end, and I will. Responsibility motivates success. Okay, the price of greatness is responsibility. Winston Churchill. I love the guy. He's almost as good as Da Vinci. And so what I'm showing here is how we bring in the responsibility of different types of ownership of the system and specification in language. We don't do enough of that. We don't pin the responsibility to people who really care about the design and really care about the requirements and really care about the technical debt and things like that. So we need to define success clearly and not let failure happen to you by accident. And even Holleberry understands that principle very well, okay? Finally, my principles of defining success clearly, well, I showed them to you. We try to define it unambiguously. We realize, like Musk, that it ain't perfect, and we've got to constantly learn fast and modify it. We should, like one of my favorite clients, under promises and over performs. That's smart tactics. And we need to pin down responsibility for the success and its delivery. And we need to do it in small incremental bits and not bet our entire budget or deadline on one big idea. That's that. I wanted to get time to go a little bit more into the systems level thinking. Here's the systems level complexity of handling COVID, and the point that everything is connected, so we really have to have ways of modeling complexity, and my competitive engineering book is exactly that, a free tool for you to use to model complexity. That's what is in this car and in the Teslas. Credible complexity, but Musk has given a recipe for how to handle it. And here's a fun little picture about worrying. There's a lot of stuff we can't deal with directly. It's outside of our control. You have to deal with things indirectly. And I found this quote with Martin Luther King. But more fun, I found a picture of Martin and Coretta when he received the Nobel Peace Prize here in Oslo. And I was there at the presentation, and Martin and Coretta and my wife and I waved to each other when he left it. There's the King of Norway, and there's the present King of Norway, Harald, My son used to smoke cigars and drink cognac with the King of Norway when he was in the Navy on the King's ship. So just for fun. And let's see, there's, I only got about a minute, and there's some stuff I'd like to talk about, but I don't have a lot of time to do it, do I? So you'll just have to read about it. There's some principles.
You can go ahead and talk, because so far we've only had one question, so we've got plenty of time. Give us 5 minutes for questions at the end. Talk at least 5 more minutes.
Okay, then with 5 minutes, I'll do it. That's good. But put your questions in now. Okay, so here's a larger impact estimation table with a very large number of values, our top 10, a typically smaller number of resources we want to track. These are quantified on a separate page. Here we have our designs. These are actually the designs in the United Nations sustainability planning, which I've analyzed and written a book about. You can have a free copy if you're interested in the United Nations goals. There's a reference down there. If you can't find it, send me an email. So these are graphically the degree of impacts, big positive impact, negative impact, side effects. This may be the main effect. Engineers look at side effects. And another interesting side effect is how much it costs, not just the side effects and the other values. And so, long story short, this is an engineering way of analyzing your ideas at early stages and then continuously, step by step, at every sprint. Okay, so this is real advanced design thinking, and you don't need it for just coding some stuff for a friend. But if you're going to solve really big problems and earn really big money and get really big credit for saving the world, you need this kind of method. So I've tried to summarize my principles for systems engineering thinking, and you will find that it's the same thing I've been talking about through the entire talk, and the same thing that Musk talked about, like clear, unambiguous, measurable requirements and architecture. Go get my systems enterprise architecture book. I tried to give you a free copy of that. And then the big trick is the agile trick of small implementable value delivery increments, but it has to be quantified going in. What are we expecting from the sprint? And coming out, what happened for real? Let's analyze it. Okay. Here's another guy who thinks the same way I do from the United Kingdom. I thought I'd just give that. So it's not just me and Musk, it's also these academics who are looking at stakeholders and artifacts and qualities just like we do. If you'd like a completely different thing there. Here's Bertrand Russell, who I used to go in campaign for nuclear disarmament marches against exploding nuclear weapons in the air, polluting my young babies. So we managed to get the tests underground, so my children are not killed by radiation. Thank you, Bertrand. And he had a few other interesting things to say too. Finally, the laws of project success are summarized here, but I have been talking about them throughout the entire talk. So, but the bottom line is, if you want success with complicated systems, you're going to have to learn something about engineering. I was not educated as an engineer. I did the social sciences. I've had to educate myself as an engineer to succeed in IT and software projects. I suggest, if you aren't already a trained engineer, that you ought to pick up some engineering ideas and be more successful. Here then is a set of free books. There's the Musk Methods book. There's the Success book. There is the Architecture book, if you're interested in architecture. And there is the aforementioned free PDF of Competitive Engineering. If you want paper, you'll have to pay the publisher for it. And I've been talking about these things since 1976, software metrics, exactly these same things. And this is the book, Principles of Software Engineering Management, that most of the guys who did the Agile Manifesto like Jeff Sutherland and Mike Cohn and Kent Beck, they all point back to this book from 1988 as giving them a lot of information about what we now call Agile, and inspired them to really focus on Agile. So, go back. I'm done. Questions are welcome.
Okay, I'm going to take back and show my screen. Thank you very much, Tom, for a wonderful presentation from my perspective, at least. I loved it. If you have any questions, please type them into the question area. I'll get to them in just a minute. Okay, Wayne asks, in the first 8 slides, Tom, it seems like you're talking about user requirements. We'll change that to stakeholders. Not detailed functional specifications. Is that correct?
Yes. So now, if you look at the competitive engineering book, there's a special chapter on functional requirements. Okay, function is what I call scope. It's what the system has to do to be in this business or that business, and it's fairly trivial. Most organizations know exactly what, a bank knows it has to charge interest rates and things like that. So I think function is necessary but trivial. It's not part of what is competitive or success. All of your competitors have the same functionality in banking or cars or something like that. So what I'm doing is I'm shifting the focus to the area where the competition and success and failure and risk is. And that is on the values and the costs. And we're not good enough at that. And that's why we fail and don't succeed often enough.
Okay. Donna asks or says, this all makes sense to me, but how do I convince others in the organization that this is how we need and should be doing business?
Okay, good question. And it ain't easy. I'll give you a simple answer. Do it yourself, almost privately, without asking permission or maybe with your boss's agreement, and succeed better, and then sell it on the basis of you succeeding where maybe others have failed. In other words, do it in an agile way. Pull in some of these ideas, like just understanding your stakeholders better, like just quantifying the major quality objective that everybody's talking about. And so you can't just throw it at everybody and say, let's go for this engineering. That is overwhelming. For the culture has to be ready and to change rapidly. Now, by the way, the organizations that have successfully used my methods, for example, Boeing, Hewlett-Packard, and Intel are very large corporate users with decades of success stories of doing it. Now, one characteristic they had were they were very, very motivated to be world class. That's why they're famous, okay? So they took one look at the methods and say, I think these are world-class methods, let's try them out. IBM was, by the way, another one in its time. And but they tried them out on pilot projects and small scale and measured that they got great results. And then they scaled up in that sequence. So everybody, deserves to be convinced by practical, measurable results in critical areas. So it's amazing what you can do all alone by saying, let me take that security requirement we're all talking about and let me play with it. In fact, let me send an email to Tom and ask him if my formulation is good enough using his method. Try me out, okay? I will help you. But at some point, if you have the right culture, open-minded, ambitious, you will have as Hewlett-Packard and Intel and Boeing had, you'll have the right managers who'll take one look at it and said, that smells good to me. Let's try it out. And if it works, let's spread it. In other words, you scale up as results dictate is the method.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of personally modeling the behaviors you want in others. If you're successful, especially the early adopters will follow you, and then
Yep.
the majority will start following the early adopters. I always
Yes.
did that with my metrics program when I worked at the telecom company. I'd go find the 2 or 3 managers who wanted to be the pioneers, who wanted the information, and the
Yeah.
others followed. They did.
Motivation is everything.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Don't waste your time on unmotivated people. You're just wasting your time. Find the people who are, and if necessary, change jobs.
Yeah. Charles asks, why don't engineers think more like engineers, and how can we begin to think more like engineers?
Good. You know, I'm always shocked at the people who I know have engineering degrees who fall in the trap of thinking like programmers and not like engineers. I think strong encouragement from the leaders. I didn't say the boss, but the leaders. That was the first part. People like Elon Musk, people like Mr. Hewlett and Mr. Packard, who my father visited their garage in the 1930s. They were leaders. That's why they could build a great large corporation. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, even Jeff Bezos is a very interesting example these days. So if you have some kind of, now leaders don't even have to have management positions. Some of my best clients, I could say Boeing and Ericsson, the person who brought me in was not a manager with power. It was a person who looked for good ideas and brought them in and made sure they got tried out. And we managed to spread to the entire corporation these good ideas through a person who had no management authority and no budget. But they knew how to get the budget, and they knew how to talk to managers, and they knew how to spread my ideas. I call them champions. And really good organizations.
I call them influencers, but
yeah, same thing. Same thing.
Well, you don't have to have power to be an influencer. I go back to Donna's question. Even if you're a leader, even if the only person you're leading is yourself.
Yep. Good. With you, Linda.
Monica says, great presentation and great topic, very useful. Donna says, thank you very much. That's the end of our questions for today. And again, Tom, I would like to thank you very much. And I know you're going to come back in December and talk about requirements for us. I believe you signed up for that. So I'm really looking forward to that. Again, this is one of the, I'm going to gush a little bit here. This is one of the men that has helped influence and lead my career. Back when I was doing ASQ software division conferences, he's one of the keynotes that I managed to bring in, for example, and he did tutorials that year as well. So I've learned a lot from him over the years. Thank you again, Tom, for participating. And thank you for watching our regular webinars and feeding questions in. Yeah, we got Norma saying again, thank you, great insights and very good presentation. Thank you, Tom, and we'll call it a day.
Yeah. Howdy.
Bye, everybody.